Hi, I'm Rick Anthony, and welcome to the Someone You Should Know podcast, the podcast that focuses on musicians, authors, and interesting people. We like to say we're making a difference one artist at a time. So sit back, have a cold one, and get ready to meet someone you should know. Now, when I moved back to Northwest Indiana in 2018, I started checking out the local music scene, and one name kept popping up time and time again. A guy that's described as a guitarist. His talent is exceptional, and I've even heard the term virtuoso kicked around a couple of times. In 2007, Guitar Player magazine described him as very beguiling and beautiful as far as describing his music. Will you please welcome Marco Villarreal? How you doing, my friend?
I'm great, Rick. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you on the show. The first time I saw you, you were playing with Little Lover, and my wife Leslie said, "Keep an eye on the guitarist. That's Marco." And I did, and I swear your playing is absolutely effortlessly. It's like the guitar is just an extension of you. Let's talk about your upbringing. You grew up in Gary, and you began your musical career. Basically, you started playing live at the age of 16, and you were exposed to music early on thanks to your siblings. Can you take us through those formative years?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I was born in Gary, and I was there till the age of 6, and then we moved. So. But even around at that time, as far as I can remember, there was always music in the house with my older brothers that were involved with it. So, there was drum sets and guitar amps and guitars and all that. So they were already into it because they were, considerably older. But there's a 12-year and an 8-year gap. So, I'm 3 years old and, one's already 15 doing his thing. And so on. So I recall those memories. So I always was just fond of music and loved music a lot and was just a big fan of music, So I didn't decide to start playing until when I was about just at the tail end of 14 years of age, And that's when I said, I want to try to play an instrument, but particularly guitar.
Mm-hmm. Did you take lessons or did you learn it all from ear?
Both.
A little bit of both? Okay.
Yeah. When I initially started, I did it by ear for about 6 months. And then I just kind of wanted to learn more, so I started taking lessons.
All right, very good. Which musicians inspire you?
Wow. I mean, so many across the board, I'd have to say. Growing up, I was really, I loved Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, Jimi Hendrix, Van Halen. Yeah. When I first heard Van Halen, I was blown away. So, yeah, I kind of came up through more of a rock.
Okay, very good. You're a fan of like Satriani and Vai and
absolutely. That came a little later, of course. Yeah, I was introduced to the music of Frank Zappa pretty early on.
Oh, really?
Like my oldest brother had a Frank Zappa record, and he put that on. He's like, "Here, check this out," and I was just like, "Wow, this is amazing," I think but basically, the start of it was. Hearing Jeff Beck when I heard
the Bridge of Sighs
music. Yeah. I'm sure I had already heard his playing and music before, but there was one moment in time I heard it and I was like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. I want to try to do that. And then that's what happened.
All right. Very good.
Tried to play guitar. My brother loaned me one of his guitars and I just started.
And he's going, oh dear God, what did I create?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. The world is much better now that you've picked up a guitar and really and truly learned to strum it. Your very first solo recording, Ethereal, was out in 2016. Featured some legendary collaborators. Can you share with our audience who was playing on that album?
Yeah, absolutely. Drummer based out of Los Angeles, Tony Austin, and bassist Tony Franklin.
Tony Franklin, yeah.
Yeah, so I prepared some music. There was an opportunity to record through a friend, a guy named Willie Waldman, who was collaborating. He was friends with a recording engineer by the name of Dave Aaron, who ran a studio in Burbank, and they just had this window of time. It was like, hey, you should come record. There's just around this time because it's available. And these guys are in town, you should really consider recording. And I was like, oh, okay. So they kind of put the idea And I was like, well, wow, if I'm going to have, because I had already known Tony Austin. I played with him one time, and I loved the way he played. And of course, I knew about Tony Franklin, no doubt. So I was like, oh, wow, if I get to record with them, I should maybe really consider it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I just started just kind of organizing musical ideas. I just started writing some music, and that's kind of like what you hear. It's kind of a raw effort, but I think it's okay. I think there's some interesting moments on there.
There is a lot. As a matter of fact, we're going to feature one of the tracks from it. The first one we're going to feature is Compression. What's the story behind this composition?
It's just something I was working on with like just some kind of chordal thing, and plus I had this an effect that was interesting. When you would play chords, it would just have this spacious kind of sound, and it was just a different effect. So it was kind of written around that effect, that guitar effect, and then I had this idea of these chords, and I just thought the name sounded cool, so that was the name of that.
All right, let's feature that right now from the album Ethereal. The song is called Compression, featuring today's podcast guest, Marco Villarreal. From 2016, the album was Ethereal. The song is Compression, featuring today's podcast guest, Marco Villarreal. And before we continue, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to the Someone You Should Know podcast. We are on the web at Someoneyoushouldknowpodcast.com. There you'll find recent news and our archive of past episodes and a whole lot more. By the way, if you're there, do me a favor and just leave a review and let us know how we're doing, okay? And we are so blessed to reach out to many cities around the world. Today, I want to salute a couple of cities that are listening. Vervik, Norway, Tucson, Arizona, and Fort Madison, Iowa. Thank you so much for tuning in as we continue our interview with Marco Villarreal. Now, what is your writing process? Do you carry around a lot of notebooks, or do you use your phone, or what is your writing process? Do you just pick up a lick or something like that and go, "Oh, I like that. Let's continue with that." What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it could be all of that. Definitely the phone. That's a handy way to capture any kind of sound or musical idea. So on my voice memo app on my phone is pretty full.
I can imagine.
There's a lot of stuff on there, and yeah, that's a good question, and it could vary. In fact, that was funny. I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine, drummer friend of mine, Kofi Baker.
I know Kofi.
Last night.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Ginger's boy. Yeah.
Ginger's son. So we were talking last night because we collaborate a lot. We just go record. I go to his house and we record, and it's the same. That's a good question because we were just talking about that. He's like, yeah, sometimes there's a lot of because we just hit record and play, and then within all of that stuff, there are moments of like, oh wow, that's really cool. That could turn into something. So yeah, the process it's strange. I mean, there's been times where it'll just come out from the whole thing is there because you envision it, and I mean sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's one of those things you can't really formulate inspiration.
One question I have to ask you: when you are writing a composition, because they're instrumentals, where do the titles come from?
It's a great question. I don't know. I always just thought different kind of maybe words that are uncommon, and that's a good question. I don't know. I don't really know. Sometimes they come from just personal experiences that maybe the music could be reminiscent of, and stuff like that. But like, I don't know. That's a good question. I've had different people say you have some interesting titles, so.
Oh, that's a very good. All right. This past spring, you're on the West Coast performing with the Miles Electric Band, and you were lucky enough to collaborate with so many great people. Through the years, who are some of the people that we should know that you've played with?
Oh, wow. That's a good question.
That's just an open-ended question there. Just go for it and just think about some of the people that you've played with.
I mean, through the years, I mean, it's been a pretty, wide stretch of time. I mean, I can go as far as back as in the early 90s, I had one opportunity where I got to play on stage one tune with Lita Ford. That was kind of cool. That was fun.
Yeah, Lita's got an album coming out soon. I know she's right now shopping record labels right now, and I know she's going to be on the show sometime later this fall. So I'll have to say, hey, do you remember Marco Villarreal?
She'll be like, no, who's that? She's not going to remember that.
Okay.
It was seriously a what do you call it? Like just spur of the moment, impromptu type of thing. But anyway, so that was one that was kind of neat. And then there was this singer in the 80s named Ron Keel.
Okay.
He had a band called Keel, and I had an opportunity to actually do a gig with him in Nashville a few years ago, and that was an interesting move because I had to learn, his repertoire in a short period of time, and just try to do the gig, So that was cool. Ron Keel's kind of well. He had a band called Steeler with that's what brought Yngwie Malmsteen to the States.
Oh, geez, really? Wow.
Yeah. So he was telling me his time when he worked with Yngwie, and I'm like, well, that's not intimidating to like be in this situation where this guy's like played with Yngwie Malmsteen, right? So whatever. But it was cool that, and then just mainly just guys from band. I had the band Freak Johnson with my friends, in there that were cool. But as far as notable, a lot of Chicago guys, like my friend Frank Russell and his band, and that's kind of like how I got to the Miles Electric thing, is through Frank's band.
Awesome. Very good. Very good. Is there an artist that is on your bucket list that you'd say, I would just love to jam with?
Wow. I mean, at the time, I probably couldn't anymore, but like Chick Corea would have been that would have been
great. Yeah, absolutely.
But that can't happen in this lifetime, at least. It's Carlos Santana.
Yeah, that would have been awesome.
That would be cool.
Yeah, he puts on a heck of a concert. He still does. In his 70s, he's still rocking in his 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not only does this guy perform with various artists and compose his own music, but he also teaches the next generation of Steve Vai's, Joe Satriani's, and Marco Villarreal's. He is a music teacher. What is the Marco Villarreal music teacher like?
Well, just one who tries to present ideas to improve a student, including myself, So it's really just it's learning is problem solving is a big part of it. Critical thinking, I guess, is like involved where, I ask the student a lot of questions. Well, how would you, what would you do to try to solve this musical problem or whatever? And then, when they start to realize, oh, wow, I can actually figure this out, whether it's some type of muscle memory tactic or whatnot, or some theoretical music theory formula or whatever, or what have you. But I'm really blessed to have some really enthusiastic people that come in that are interested in learning about music. And
all right, very good. What's a good number for them to reach you? As far as if there's someone listening right now that would like to have you as their teacher, where do you teach at, and what's a number for them to call?
Well, they could email me.
Email you? Okay.
Yeah, at marcotune, MARCOTUNE @gmail.com.
All right.
And I have a home studio here in Hobart, Indiana, and then I teach at a music shop in Maryville, Rubino's Music. So yeah, I'm pretty reachable.
Awesome. All right. Next tune we're going to feature is called Turpitude. And hearing this, I envision your fingers all over the fretboard. What's your story behind this jazzy number?
Yeah, that one just came about. I remember that one. I renamed it Turpitude 2 because it's kind of an extension of what I originally had. And it was just one of those things where I don't even remember. It was a tune that just came. It just came. It was like I had to like kind of keep up to, because the idea was there. It was just like this flow of like, all right, this is what it's doing, and I would just program the drums. I knew this is what it's going to do here, and it was just boom, 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 and then it's like, okay, now I'm going to put this on top of it or whatever. You know what I mean? So that one came pretty quickly, but then there was a gap of time where it sat for a while, and then I came back to it and kind of revamped it a little bit. And I eventually would like to record that with a full, group with, musicians, because that's all what you're hearing there is, the drums are programmed. Actually, that's about it. Everything else I'm playing the bass and all the guitar parts, but I programmed the drums. But I think they have an interesting sound. So yeah, that's how that one came about.
All right, let's feature that Turpitude 2 from today's podcast guest, Marco Villarreal. Great song, Turpitude 2, right there from today's podcast guest, Marco Villarreal. Looking at your Facebook page, you play out all the time, either solo or with a group. Where's the best way for local fans to actually check out where you're going to be? Is it Facebook, or do you have another social media that would be best?
Yeah, Facebook's a good outlet. I have my personal page or the music page on Facebook, and then there's there's an Instagram page as well that has promotion on it. So
all right, very
you
good.
can just find it. I think there's actually 2 Instagrams, but one of the better one would be Marco _ I think there's a dash in there. I think Villarreal official, whatever. So, but you'll find it.
We'll include those in the show notes. So if you happen to be listening in the car right now and you're going, oh gosh, what is that? It's down in the show notes. We'll include that so you don't have to park and pull over the side of the road. Okay.
Right. Awesome.
Playing out continually for so many years, you've had your share of load-ins and load-outs and interesting gigs where things went absolutely right. But then you had those ones where things didn't go quite as planned. This next feature is called Tales from the Road. We always love to do this with musicians. It's those infamous road stories where things didn't go quite as planned. So, Marco, the floor is yours. What would be your Tales from the Road?
I've played at some things. I remember I played one time it was in a auto garage for these mechanics. That was kind of interesting. So I was like, oh, this is cool. So, all right.
Was it just yourself, or was it with a band, or what?
It was a solo thing. Yeah, just myself. They
performing?
Wanted me to play for their lunch hour. Yeah, come play. All right.
I could just see the rhythm section would be just a couple of of guns doing the changing out the tire lug nuts.
Absolutely right. Kind of like Jeff Beck's Guitar Shop record.
Yeah, there you go.
He had those sounds in there. Anyways, that.
No,
I remember one time. Okay, here's one.
Okay,
this is interesting.
Go for it.
I was playing in Chicago with Frank Russell's band, and I broke a string at like the end of a solo. I was taking a solo and the string broke. I was like, oh, I better change it. I got to change this really quickly, because there was a moment that was crucial for the guitar to come in later in the song that I needed that string. I was like, there's no way I can play that. I maybe try to figure out real quickly somewhere else in the guitar, so I'm changing the string, like try not to panic during the piano solo. And I'm like changing. I'm like nervous. I'm like, oh my God, am I going to make it? And I'm glancing over. I'm like, please keep the solo going. I'm thinking like mentally telling the piano player, just keep going and doing my string changing. And it was so cosmic that as soon as I got the string tuned and ready to go, within literally like a minute,
mm-hmm.
he wasn't even, I don't know how it happened, but the pianist, Robert Irving, he wasn't even, maybe he was aware I was changing. I don't know, but he ended as soon as when I was ready. That's when he ended, and it was like, okay, here's my part, and it came in. So that was like a kind of an interesting thing. I was like, wow, how does that pan out in the timing process?
Wow.
It just worked out.
That's
very
cosmic there.
That's different. That's kind of a fun one.
Awesome. Very good.
But anyway, that was just one of those where it was like, don't panic, just get it, go through it, and you'll be all right.
The show must go on, folks.
I have one more.
Okay, go for it.
I used to play at this country club in Michigan, and this was years ago, and it was with a trio, like a jazz trio, and there was across from where we were playing in the patio or whatever, there was like they had like a banquet hall for weddings and things like that. So over there, they had a DJ playing music, at a fair volume, it's like, well, there's this music over there, and then we're supposed to play. So we went to the manager and said, well, how, we can't start playing because that music over there. They weren't thinking. It's like, well, wait a second, there's an event going on over there with music. Why are you going to have live music here? It just doesn't make any sense. So somebody said, well, sarcastically, well, how about we just play along with that music from the DJ? We'll just play along with it. And the manager's response was, oh, okay. It's like, we're not going to do that. So that was kind of a weird, So, you get these weird moments. And,
Do you have any rituals that you do before you take the stage?
Yeah, that's a good one. Because sometimes, I get to do all different kinds of, gigs
Mm-hmm.
where some are, a lot of local gigs, you're just kind of in the back, you're just more like wallpaper kind
Mm-hmm.
of.
Exactly.
And then the ones that are, legit, well, they're all legit, but you know what I mean? Like where you have a listening audience, sometimes it's like, it's possible to get nervous, and I just try not to let that happen. So I don't really have any rituals. I just kind of like just try to go get through it.
Yeah, when you play a gig like Don Quixote's over in Valpo, do they like buy you shots or anything like that while you're up there?
Well, not necessarily. One time somebody insisted on buying me a shot. Yeah, that's true. No, they're just. I love playing there. That's a great place to play, and because it's like it's a nice little environment where your people are listening, but it's the way it's set up. It's people appreciate it too, and
Oh
they
yeah.
can still kind of have their conversation, but they're listening as
Mm-hmm.
well, and it's great. And the owners are so generous.
I know they're
Carlos,
wonderful people. I'll never forget the
yeah,
first time we were there. The waitress found out it was our first time there. The owner came out and sat down with us for a couple of
yeah,
minutes and told us this is what you need to order because this is
yeah,
what the
yeah,
chef's specialty is. I'm like, fine, fine, sounds great.
yeah. So they're really generous on like Carlos. He always brings me a glass of wine, and
Mm-hmm.
it's generously filled. I have a funny story. There was one year I was playing there, and I just decided like I was gonna do like a Lent thing and not like drink,
Mm-hmm.
for 40 days or whatever. So Carlos asked me, he goes, "Well, what kind of do you want? Red wine? What kind of wine do you want?" And I was like, I go, "Carlos, I'll just take a water, and I'm not gonna have any wine." And he gave me this strange look, and he goes, "What kind of guitar player doesn't drink wine?" And then he walked away.
one that is actually observing Lent.
Yeah.
Very good,
So,
very
but it's
good.
cool. Yeah, that's a great place. I'm there every other Friday,
All right,
every other
I
weekend,
was
to be
going to ask you,
honest.
what about what's on the agenda for August and fall? What you would be looking for?
Oh yeah, good question. There's some stuff coming up. August 8th, I'm doing a thing. I think it's called Jazz and Blues in the Park, and that's in Munster. What's that? Wicker Memorial Park. I think that might. I don't know if that's Highland or Munster, but it's off of Ridge Road and Indianapolis Boulevard.
Okay.
So they do like a thing every Tuesday, and I'll be there August 8th with Lanny Turner on drums and Frank Russell on bass. So that's a good one. That'll be a good thing to do. And then with that same trio, actually, I got another one in August 19th at the MouseTrap in Indianapolis.
Okay.
Okay, and that's going to be with trumpeter Willie Waldman, his work is with he did work with Snoop Dogg and Tupac, and he collaborates with the drummer Steve Perkins from Jane's Addiction. So, anyways, it's his thing, and then it's going to have Kofi Baker on drums and bassist Rick Fiorabracci, who's played with Chick Corea and Tom Jones and Brian May, and just
Wow.
the list goes on and on and on. So that's going to be a fun night of just improvisational kind of music. That's at the Mousetrap on August 19th.
Okay. We'll
And
include those dates and such down in the show notes. So if you happen to be in the Indy area in August, to be sure to check that out. Any final thoughts, Marco?
Don't stop and always keep moving forward.
Awesome, very good. Closing
Paraphrasing
track.
a Frank Zappa quote. That's something like what I think that's a Frank Zappa paraphrased quote. So.
All right, very good. Closing track here we're going to feature is one that I really love. This one really blew me away. Outflux. What's the story on Outflux?
Oh yeah, I had some studio time that a friend of mine arranged for me, and I just basically went in and recorded on acoustic guitar, and that one was kind of somewhat composed and somewhat improvised, and that's how that one just kind of happened.
Great song, real good. Well, Marco,
Yeah,
I thank you so much for being a guest on the Someone You Should Know podcast. We got a growing family here, and we really and truly thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you play out real soon.
for sure. And I appreciate you having me on, Rick. Thank you.
Hi, this is Rick Anthony, thanking you again for tuning in to this episode of the Someone You Should Know podcast. Before I go, I want to share some friends of mine who also have a podcast. Give them a listen, and I invite you to check us out next time right here on the Someone You Should Know podcast. All right, here's my friends right now from the Rock and Roll Chicago podcast.
Hey, everybody, it's Ray the Roadie.
And this is Hollywood Mike
with the Rock and Roll Chicago podcast, coming to you from the Illinois Rock and Roll Museum on Route 66 in Joliet, Illinois.
Where once a week we are interviewing local musicians and singer-songwriters. And the podcast itself covers a wide range of topics, including, but not limited to, the history of rock and roll in Chicago, the current state of the scene, and the challenges and opportunities facing musicians today.
So join us every Tuesday for a new exciting episode of the Rock and Roll Chicago podcast.